At least 80 Iraqi warplanes flown to safety in Iran. Another Scud attack on Israel. Report no injuries. And the start of the battle against the largest oil spill in history. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting tonight with a special War Update edition. Against the larger tragedy involving the loss of lives, there remain serious environmental and economic concerns in the Persian Gulf, symbolized by that giant oil slick. It seems clear that Saddam will go to any extreme in his desperate battle, and when it comes to the so-called oil card, his game may only be beginning. Deborah Potter reports.
Despite the apparent success of the Allied effort to shut off the flow of oil into the Persian Gulf, analysts say that the threat to the region is far from over, that Saddam Hussein could do it all again.
When the United States bombed the Kuwaiti manifolds, it opened Pandora's box. With respect to now, Saddam may follow up with destruction of other oil facilities, and there is just havoc that can be wreaked on the facilities and on the environment.
The Iraqis still control hundreds of Kuwaiti wells, refineries, pipelines, and storage tanks containing billions of gallons of oil. And military officials say the possibility of additional spills is a definite concern.
I don't know what exactly it would do to military operations. I know it's already a very serious it's a serious act of environmental terrorism. It would only make it worse.
Another oil weapon that's already been used by the Iraqis, setting fire to several Kuwaiti wells. Environmentalists fear that could be just a prelude.
If you have dozens and dozens burning all at once, imagine the conflagration. No one has ever seen this kind of burning episode on the history of the planet. Yet Saddam Hussein is capable, because he's mined these facilities, of setting such a conflagration in motion.
The fires could release tons of toxic pollutants, causing enormous damage to livestock and agriculture in the region. And beyond the damage done by the current spill, any additional oil dumped in the Gulf could spread the devastation, killing more wildlife and crippling the fishing industry, potentially turning the Gulf into a Dead Sea.
This is really a tragedy for him to destroy the environment, especially marine life in that area. It's a disaster.
By letting crude oil spill into the Gulf, Saddam Hussein has made it clear he won't hesitate to wage environmental war. And experts say that if he chooses to do it again, there's not much the U.S. can do to stop him. Deborah Potter, CBS News, Washington.
Even as experts from around the world arrived on the Saudi Arabian coast today, concern climbed that the most advanced methods might be of little use against an oil slick this massive. But correspondent Jerry Bowen reports people with experience in cleanup say there is a long-shot chance at saving animals and reducing the slick's damage.
It's the kind of disaster environmentalists and military planners alike knew was possible. A massive crude oil slick flowing towards Saudi Arabia, a chemical weapon in its own right, attacking at 15 miles an hour.
The oil spill in the Persian Gulf is probably the worst oil spill the world has ever seen, and the environmental damage will be felt for centuries.
And officials involved in fighting America's worst oil spill say cleanup of the Persian Gulf disaster is virtually impossible. The Exxon Valdez spilled only 11 million gallons. The Gulf oil slick is 11 million barrels, 460 million gallons.
Unless you get out there in the first 48, 72 hours and hit it with things like dispersants or burning or massive amounts of conventional equipment, you've pretty much lost the battle. Once a slick is that size, you can pretty much kiss it goodbye.
Still, experts at the International Bird Rescue Center in California, where they were cleaning up birds today from a small local spill, say they can make a difference, assuming they can work safely.
Certainly, the sooner that anything is done, the more chance we're going to have. I never think in an oil spill situation that it's hopeless. So I would expect that if there was a real effort made, that there would be thousands of birds that would be a possibility of saving.
The same company that used microbes to gobble up some of last summer's Galveston, Texas spill was already working on contingency plans with the Saudi Arabian government before the war. Officials claim their process can still be used to save fisheries and water treatment facilities.
We think that by pushing the oil back a bit and then having defensive perimeters and good old marine terminology, which you would continually spray with microbes, that we can sanitize zones and move them back outward from the shore.
And oil spill specialist Al Allen, a consultant to Aramco, the main Saudi oil producer, said it may be time to shelve the usual environmental concerns to get the job done.
If it's safe to work in an area where the oil has not weathered too much, then I really feel that we can do some meaningful elimination of oil through burning.
But the experts agree that nature can't be expected to help as much or as quickly as it did in Alaska's Prince William Sound, dispersing the oil that spilled from the Valdez.
They're really like night and day. Prince William Sound is an enormously dynamic body of water. We have very, very violent storms up here. There's a tremendous amount of flush that goes in and out of Prince William Sound. Basically, it sort of recycles its water system once a month, whereas the Persian Gulf, they talk in terms of tens and tens of years.
Tens and tens of years to recover from a war that is now into day 13. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Some of the most evocative pictures of the Persian Gulf War have not involved fighting. They are the appalling record of a kind of human madness, the thick goo of the oil slick seen from the town of Khafji on the North Saudi Arabian coast. Pictures taken by a CBS cameraman distributed worldwide. To some, that scene is a terrifying reminder of another oil spill which occurred in the Gulf during the Iran-Iraq War in 1983. One of those who studied that spill is Dr. Farouk El-Baz of Boston University. Dr. El-Baz, who is an earth scientist and specialist in space photography, joins us from Boston. Thanks for being with us, Doctor. Are we confident that we can keep this oil out of the Saudi Arabian water supply?
I don't really think that we can be confident that it will not reach some of the desalinization plants, because there are 13 of them on the western Gulf Coast. And the situation is exacerbated by the amount of the spill. However, there is a great deal of groundwater beneath the desert sand, and some of that brackish water could be pumped into the desalinization plant.
Is there any doubt in your mind that this was sabotaged by Saddam Hussein?
No, I don't really think that there is any doubt in my mind, basically because the Baghdad radio and television had announced that there will be oil spilled in the Gulf.
Should we have been prepared for this kind of disaster?
I think so. Because of these announcements, we should have been. And we could have had cameras and sensors on some of these planes that are flying around to give us an early warning of what is happening. And we could also have had the cleanup mechanisms and experts in place at the outset of the spill.
Now, what can the environmental teams recommend to do about this?
There may be three things to do. First, there are rubber boats and foam extensions that contain the oil from coming too close to the area of the intake of the desalinization plant. But there are also ways to clean up the oil that reaches the beaches, and I'm sure they could also begin a volunteer program to help the wildlife. Some of the birds that we see in Al-Khafji there could be cleaned up by using a little bit of detergent.
Dr. El-Baz, we have only a few seconds left, but you covered the oil spill in 1983. Why didn't we hear about that, and what were the consequences?
I really think it's because it was too far away and it did not affect people here in the West at all. And the consequences, when I saw them myself in 1983, were that there were two types of oil that floated on the water. First, the thin oil covered the plankton, which is the microscopic animals and plants on which the little fish feed. And then the thick oil landed on the bottom of the Gulf. And where it landed, it affected the fisheries and the shrimp areas, and also landed on some of the coral reefs, causing permanent damage.
To say that our time is up, but we do very much appreciate you being with us. We have more to come on tonight's CBS Evening News, so stay here with us.